Good morning, everybody. Oh, good. I mean, it's the last, I know it's getting late in the conference, so I just want to make sure that everybody's still awake. So Larry Megan from Linde. Linde is the largest industrial gas company in the world, so we provide oxygen, hydrogen. We provide hydrogen to the Motiva refinery that the previous speaker was talking about. I'm not sure how I feel about him trying to analyze his industrial gas usage, but we'll talk about that more later. So I just wanted to share some experiences that we have, whether you call it digital transformation, manufacturing 4.0, smart manufacturing. We've been at it for a long time. We've made a lot of mistakes. I want to share some of our experiences in that and hopefully maybe give you guys some insights that can help you along your journeys as well. So if you want to go ahead. So I titled this, if you want to go to the next, I have the clicker, sorry. My mistake. So I titled this Avoiding the Potholes in Smart Manufacturing. There's many of them, and again, from experience, we've bounced into many of these in our own past. And so just some things, as you're thinking about digital transformation, what does it mean for my organization? Some things to kind of watch out for, right? Okay, fine, our people will change. The reality is that most digital transformation projects fail, in my opinion, not because we couldn't find a suitable technical solution, it's because collectively we weren't able to manage the organizational change required to really enable that, right? We have a 2-year plan. We have a strategy. We'll get it done in 2 years. We'll be done. It'll be great, and then we'll move on to the next thing, right? That's not the reality. As folks in the process space know, we've been at this for 40 years at least, and we will be at it for the next 40 years, and there's sort of it's much more of a journey than a 2-year plan. Oh yeah, we can scale it in 6 months, no problem. We ran this great proof of concept, now let's go expand it globally. Piece of cake, right? No, because you run into a lot of the problems that Gene was just talking about, right? So what are you gonna do about that? Oh, no problem, integrate it. Yeah, we'll integrate it. we can integrate it into our systems. Oh, wait a minute, we have 12 different control systems. We have 5 different ERP systems globally, right? How are we gonna manage all of that stuff? And last but not least, my favorite, we'll just find an AI solution for it, right? No problem, whatever the problem is. And not that I'm against AI, we do a lot of work in that space, but again, there has to be a broader picture to it. So I just want to I'll start with a specific case study from Linde and kind of how both we look at it technically, but also about how it is driving some change within our organization and how we have to think about change within our organization. This beautiful picture is our Cantarell, Mexico facility. It provides nitrogen to feed the oil fields in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's actually our largest revenue generating site on the planet. So it's a substantial operation from the context of the Linde business. And as some of the, as the speaker from Motiva kind of noted, our job is we provide basically a commodity to just about anybody, any manufacturing operation in the world. So we're providing oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, et cetera, right, to many of the folks in this room. And it's really critical to their operation, right? And so our CEO is fond of saying that really our customers are paying for reliability, right? It's a utility. You open up the valve, the oxygen comes out, there should be no questions asked. It just has to be there all of the time. And so that is our customer's viewpoint. And so that's how kind of we have to reflect that in the way that we do things and how we look at smart manufacturing and/or digital transformation. So what does that mean? Well, from our perspective then, to meet those, we have to avoid catastrophic failures. There's a lot of big spinning machines at that facility that are required to be operating basically 24/7, 365 days a year to do what we need to do for our customers. And from an engineering perspective, we really want to have real-time visibility around what's going on in those machines all the time, right? We want to know if there's a potential problem so that we can act on it before we have a catastrophic failure. Now, the flip side of that is there's pressure to, of course, one, how are we going to reduce maintenance costs? And two, we have limited experts, right? If we have a vibration problem in one of our machines, those folks are not growing on trees. We have a relatively small, even for the size of our organization, we have a relatively small number of people who can really look at that data and make a good analysis of what it really means. And so then the problem becomes, we can't always bring the expert to the problem, so how do we bring the problem and the data to the expert, right? And how do we enable that? That's really fundamental to our strategy in a business where we have, in our case, over 2,000 manufacturing facilities globally. So I'll give you one case study of some of the things that our team has been doing over the past couple of years, and we have many of these, but here's just one example. So the picture in the top is a reciprocating compressor, or a piston-driven compressor. If you know compression, this is a pretty big machine. It's a 6th-row machine. It's a substantial investment when you buy a new one. This one's actually fairly old. And again, this is actually one that's feeding hydrogen into a refinery. So if the machine breaks down, then all of a sudden, we're not able to reliably supply to our customer. And again, that causes a big problem. And we buy these machines directly from the OEMs. And typically they don't come with a lot of instrumentation on them. And so what we've been doing over the past few years, we have a big fleet. We probably have over, 2,000 recip compressors from small to really big. This is on the really big scale. But we've basically been doing an exercise where, as it shows a little bit in the bottom, our team has been doing a lot to put more instrumentation into those machines. So in this specific case, we've added 100 new data points that we can collect data off of because the cost of the sensors is getting cheaper and cheaper. We can use wireless in some cases, we use wired in some cases, but then kind of a traditional thing, right? So we put a lot more measurement capability around the machine, pressures, temperatures, vibrations, and then we've actually built a software analytics platform to collect all of that data, to get insights from that, and then obviously to bring that information to the folks when they need it. And this could be anything from what I would consider typical process frequency, like every minute or those kinds of things, down to, in this case, up to 15,000 samples per second, because that's the level of resolution that we need if the vibration expert needs to really look at that machine and the profiles, the Fourier transforms, all that kind of stuff, and try to figure out, hey, what's really going on with this piece of machinery? So this really is a big data thing. We collect more than 1 billion data points off of this machine in the course of a year. And we've built an architecture around that. We've built a NoSQL backend system to collect all of this data. And it's really a substantial benefit for us. Part of the challenge that we run into in our business is typically solutions like this, and there are existing commercial solutions. Hopefully nobody in the room is from one of those vendors. But they tend to be priced, frankly, at the offshore oil and gas market. And while I say reliability is important to us, we're not willing to necessarily spend that much on the solutions. And so we were able to develop an in-house solution that really lowers the cost, gives us more flexibility around capability, and then allows us to then roll it out more broadly within our fleet. And as I say, we will get substantial savings out of this specific solution. So here's the good news besides that, is that, I always talk about, when people talk about digital transformation, pilots without a strong foundation are just that. They're simply pilots. So when you're thinking about digital transformation, you're thinking about new applications, it's certainly important to test and develop these new POCs, just like I talked about here. But if you don't have bifocals, in the sense of you're looking at the next new thing, but you're not thinking about how good is my foundation and am I building up my foundation in the long term, kind of like what Gene talked about before, then you're not going to be successful. You won't be able to scale, right? You'll have all sorts of issues with that. And so again, in this space, this isn't true across all of our business, but in the plant operations space, the good news is we actually do have global platforms already in place that enable us then to relatively easily be able to scale these solutions across multiple locations. So for example, when you're talking about maintenance and predictive reliability, we have a global work order system in place and we have the infrastructure there. Of course, we have global data historian that is consistent from site to site. So again, the data looks more or less the same as we move around. And we have a long-standing, by the nature of the industrial gas business, we have a long-standing history in remote operations, and we have a lot of infrastructure built up, both in terms of technical infrastructure as well as people infrastructure. So as I said, we have some systems in place to bring the problem to the people. The challenge that we have, though, is when you do things like this, now you've just added one more piece to a very complex puzzle, right? And so I stole this from my friends at SESME, which is one of the DOE-funded Manufacturing USA institutes. And the idea is and everybody has this, right? If you look across all of the systems that you use to run their business, there's all sorts of them. And so as we've just added one new one in this case around preventative maintenance or predictive maintenance, okay, now that's one more system that we've added into this big ecosystem where they don't all necessarily talk together, right? There's a lot of data, it's still in different places. And so as a result, if I'm a plant manager, now I've given a plant manager one more place to go to get information around what's going on with their plant, with the other 6 or 7 places they already have to go to do their job, right? And so that's a challenge. And how are they going to be able to manage that? And sometimes what happens is you go from smart manufacturing to not so smart manufacturing, and we'll just go back to putting paper stuff on the wall because that's the thing that works best for the guys on the plant floor, right? And that happens, right? So how can we overcome in the future? How can we overcome some of those challenges? So again, new integration challenges. So for us, and we have multiple solutions. I just showed you one around recips, but we have several of these kinds of things where we've done this digital transformation exercise. Collect new data, do the analytics, bring it to the end user, et cetera. But we also need a cultural change. So what we've realized is that when we talk about scaling, not just from a technical perspective, but across the organization, a couple of things. We historically do projects like this like an engineering company, right? An engineering company, give me your spec document, I'll build something towards that spec document, we'll build a project, we'll build it, and we'll hand it over, and we'll just move on to the next thing, right? And that's how we've thought historically, because again, that's really what our DNA is as a longstanding engineering company. But we really do have to think more like a software company in this space now, right? To really get the value out of these kinds of solutions. And so the why of what we do has not changed. We do it because we still need to provide reliable supply to our customers. But the product that we deliver, the what we deliver, and how we go about it is evolving. And so just a couple of points on that. We are shifting from what I call a projects to a products to a platform kind of methodology where it's not just a project, but we think about it more as a product. It's a software product that's an integral asset to the organization. And if you were a software company and this was your only product, you would say, okay, well, how do I continue to improve that, to develop it, to build new capability, to make sure it's meeting the needs of my customers, et cetera. And we need to think more like that. And as we develop more products, then you have to transition to more of this platform concept, whereas simplistically, how do I get more reusable components, right? How do I minimize the engineering time to build these new kinds of solutions? How do you get there, right? And so this is a simple example, actually not related to the reliability one, but where we've developed basically a web-based platform for a variety of applications that we build internally, and two very different examples. One is around pricing for our products, and one is around safety and kind of managing basically safety information, location information within one of our large campuses so that we know where people are and they know how to get out if there's an emergency, those kinds of things. But all built actually on the same platform, software platform, to be able to enable different kinds of solutions. And it's the same thing in the machinery space and the reliability space. So again, we are involved, we're a proponent of organizations like SESME, like the Open Process Automation Forum, because for the reasons I'm talking about, we can see the value going forward, and we know it's not a short-term journey, but we know that as we evolve as an organization, it's going to be really important for us to have platforms, to have flexibility, to have a means where we don't have to do individual integration of this solution with 10 other different solutions, right, every time we roll something out. And again, it's not something that you get to overnight. It's not something you get to in a couple of years, but it is something where, again, as a vision, that's where we want to get to. And so we really try to partner with these external ecosystems to help us learn as well around how we can do that most effectively. And then the other thing we're doing, we talk about the how, we're doing more around agile development, right? So again, stealing from the software world, if you're not familiar with agile, I would certainly ask you to take a look at it and read up on it and search it and so forth. But simplistically, if you boil it down to its essence, it's really just the means to create a faster feedback loop between the people developing the product and the end users of the product, right? And how do you do that? And a good example of where it's helpful, again, kind of stealing from the IT world, is when you move something that's complicated, that requires subject matter experts, but this is something we've built 25 times before, and yeah, we need people who are real experts to be able to do it, but we can also sort of codify that process, and if we follow the right steps, we'll come up with a good product. Where the best definition, this is true for many things in the software world, hindsight is the best solution. You go through a bunch of iterations, you finally get to the end, and you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that we got there and we did 12 different things to get there and went in 12 different directions and finally got to the right answer, right? And so you say, yeah, it sounds like, boy, I wish we would have thought of that at the beginning, but the reality is you get there because you have continuous iteration with your customers. And so the idea is just to not develop a big spec and then go execute it. It's to develop, right in the IT space, a minimum viable product, that you can share with your end customers, and then you can iterate on that, on a real thing, right? It's just a different way to approach things, but it makes a lot of sense in the software space. And again, when we have to think about ourselves in this space as much as a software company as an engineering company. Here's a good slide that I steal from Gartner that kind of explains how to think about, generally speaking, product development. It doesn't have to be for software, by the way. We use this for other things, but certainly in the software space, this is where it came out of. And these ideas of design thinking, which is really just trying to be more empathetic and really understand what your customer need really is, as opposed to assuming you think you know what it is. And then how to basically, between lean startup and agile, how to develop something quickly, how to iterate on it, and how to have a process basically of continuous improvement. Where the left-hand side of this is really around, first of all, how do we really make sure that we build the right thing, that we don't spend a lot of time building the wrong thing? And on the other side, then, once we feel like we have a good definition of what the end user wants, then how do you build the thing right? And again, often you build the thing right through a continuous feedback loop with your customers, not necessarily by just dividing all these specs up front and then trying to deliver something. And then having people say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted, right? So we're really rethinking our process. And then the last slide, actually, as part of rethinking the process, we're also rethinking our organization. Because again, if we take about, as I mentioned, we have several of these products now, and we have to, and they're all done by the product development team. So we have a team of folks, so mostly engineering folks, who will develop a new product, but then they're also tasked with how do we sustain, how do we maintain, how do we improve, and we think we have to bifurcate our organization some and basically separate the new innovation piece from the sustaining piece of it. And again, on the sustaining piece of it, it's really thinking like a product management team would think of from one of the software vendors, more so like that, right? Versus what's the next new thing to build. And we can talk about how we're doing that. So we're rethinking our organization. So finally, my closing thought, Darwinianism is not about strength, it's not about intelligence, it's around adaptability, fundamentally. And so if you're gonna be successful in this space, it really is gonna come from, like I say, not having the best technology, not even having the smartest people, but really developing an organization that is willing and able to change and change quickly. And with that, that's all I have. Thanks.